Да. А что такие страшные? Вот это прикольно. Ну, те ролики, которые они показали, они, конечно, крутые. Если это действительно просто Max to Vantage из короны, Max плюс корона to Vantage, это, конечно, охеренно. То есть вот Old Gods это прям вообще топ. Если у вас хорошо с английским, посмотрите вебинар, как бы я его полностью записал. В общем, ребятушки, что я узнал из этого всего спича? А, Друзья,
We
всем
had some leaks
привет.
as well.
Друзья, всем привет. Значит, смотрите, что у нас тут сейчас происходит. Начинается вебинар по Corona Render 12 и Vantage 2,5. Я его решил записать. Не знаю, если получится, как бы я эту запись выложу, как бы если будет все нормально, все пойдет. Вот, час, собственно, всего вебинар, так что посмотрим. Возможно, буду что-то комментировать. В общем, поехали. У меня еще там параллельно болоньезе готовится, так что фиг его знает, буду бегать туда-сюда. Окей.
Who else is on? Who else is on here?
Quite a lot of people. Well, we've gone 2 minutes past the hour, so I think we can get the ball rolling. Because a little bit of an intro before we begin. If you have questions, you'll find the Q&A box. Please press that. Type your question in there. And at the end of the session, we will go over those. I'll answer any Corona ones. And of course, our friends here from Narrative will answer anything you have about their rather amazing animations. Can't wait to finally show those to you. I've been anticipating this for a while. So thanks to everybody for coming along for this webinar. We'll be telling you about Corona 12 and how you, mostly focusing on how you can export your scenes to Vantage and what you can do with them once you get them there. I'm Tom, if you don't know me. I'm the product manager for Chaos Corona. My partner in crime from Chaos is Nate. Later on, he'll be walking you through the first steps in working with Corona and Vantage. Now, me and Nate, we can tell you how fantastic Corona and Vantage are, but then, you know, hey, we would say that we work for the company that made it. So what we're going to do is hear from Corona users' narrative. They'll be telling us later on what they have, the process and how they found the experience. But to kick us off, just to have some wow factor, guys, can you play one of your 3 animations that you were able to make?
Yes, sir. Let me.
Thank you. And this was actually in a pre-release. This is not even the final version of Corona to Vantage. They started work early.
Yes. Let me show the this little thing. So 3, 2, 1.
Это пипец какая жесткая сцена, если это все рендерить на... вживую, так сказать, на компьютере. Это я не знаю, сколько, дней надо рендерить в таком разрешении. Ну, это даже Full HD. Класс.
Now you're not getting the full experience because of streaming, which is very sad, but you will be seeing these animations out there on the web at some point, so you can enjoy them in all the glory. I'm totally blown away by what you guys did. And later on, after Nate, we'll be able to hear from them directly, and then we'll have our Q&A where you can ask them questions. So in that case, I'm going to hand over to Nate, who is going to give us an introduction to Corona, Vantage, and the workflow between them. Take it away, Nate.
Alrighty, well, hello everybody. My name is Nate. You might have seen me in some of the tutorials that we do on YouTube and in the academy and all kinds of different sort of mediums, I guess. I'm a 3D artist here at Chaos, and I'm gonna basically take you through the first half of this presentation where we're gonna be talking about Corona 12, and Chaos Vantage. Before we move any further, can everybody see my slides? Can we just get a little bit of a visual confirmation? Sorry, auditory confirmation.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can. Yes, we can.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you, people, because we can't take that for granted. Sometimes things don't work. Anyhow, let's take a look at what's on the to-do list for today. So first up, we're going to start with a brief introduction to Corona and Vantage. So we're just going to distill as to what Corona is, what Vantage is. So we have a basic idea of what exactly we're talking about here today for all of you that are kind of new to our Chaos products. Then we're going to move on to talking about the benefits of the Corona to Vantage scene export. So why exactly would you care about this new feature, this new interop that we've added in Corona 12? And spoiler alert, it's really awesome. You've already seen the animation and narrative folks made. It can be really useful. So we're super excited about it. Then we're going to move on. We're going to talk about how the actual integration works. So this is not going to be a tutorial. It's just going to be sort of a basic overview of how the workflow looks like, essentially. Okay, just so we have a basic understanding of how this interop actually works. Then Tom will take over to talk about what else is new in Corona 12, because there's quite a couple of additional things that are not related to Vantage that are there in Corona 12. Some really useful stuff. And then we're gonna let the narrative folks talk about their case study they're going to be presenting. So one of the animations you already saw, but they have two more prepared, which you haven't seen yet. And man, I'm really excited. I'm really excited myself. I kind of already know what they're going to talk about, but I'm excited to see it in action because it's awesome what they've prepared, and the end results are just stunning. But yeah, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get there, promise. And then we're also gonna have a Q&A section, so you can ask questions about Corona, about the case study that narrative did, things like that, right? Okay, so that's on the to-do list. What we got on the to-do list for this webinar, and so let's just get to it. So let's first do a very brief introduction to Corona. So all of you who are not familiar with Corona, let's just quickly talk a little bit about it. So Corona is your best choice for ArcViz. That's how we're positioning it. So it's basically made for realistic, ultra realistic ArcViz images. You can also use it in other sort of fields, right? If you're working in product viz, if you're working in other sort of areas, but it's tuned for realism and it's tuned for ease of use. Now, the key sort of things that make Corona are, we already mentioned, ease of use. So the whole ethos behind Corona and what kind of makes it unique compared to some of the other tools out there is that with Corona, our developers and our entire teams are kind of focused on making you feel like an artist and not as a technician.
Ты нажал рендер,
So we want
и
this
все
tool to
заработало.
be as
Да.
easy to use as possible,
есть,
so you can just focus on your craft, on these sort of artistic elements, etc., etc.
По сравнению с VRM,
A quote that
примерно
I'd like
так
to
и
use
есть.
is that render setup in Corona is really as simple as pressing the render button, and that's pretty much all that there is to it. Then what makes Corona is its incredible photorealism. So you see this image by Jakub Čech on the right side. It's one of my personal favorite
Jakub
ones.
Čech это вообще топовый чувак.
It's a little bit dated now, but it's still so awesome to look at. It's, and Corona really allows you to do that. It's tuned for realism out the box, and it kind of doesn't get in the way with, you having to have to go in and tune settings to get it looking realistic. It does that sort of outside, as soon as you start rendering. It's built for ArcViz. It has an optimized workflow, which allows you to get to photorealistic results as quickly as possible. But again, you can also use it in other fields if you still want to, right? Here are just a couple of images created with Corona. We're just going to go through them real quickly, but hopefully you can see that there's a lot of detail there. And we also have caustics. So caustics are also designed to be easy to use. And here's just an example of this pool, having caustics. I'm a big fan of caustics, although they still need more time to render, so we're not trying to hide that fact. Caustics are tough to render out. Then we're talking about ease of use with Corona, right? But it does not mean that the tool set is limited. Corona has a very powerful tool set. So it doesn't mean that even though it's easy to use, it doesn't mean that you're limited by it, right? So you've got extra tools in there like Corona pattern, Corona decals, the materials, the maps, the shaders, depending on which CCC you use, right? There's a lot of functionality in there that makes creating scenes, materials, and more straightforward.
Я бы на их месте еще бы добавил какие-то анимационные материалы, то есть типа работу с огнем, с дымом, там разрушение и так далее. Прямо в короне.
Corona, and the same principles apply. Corona is tuned for realism out the box. It's easy to use, and quite frankly, rendering out animations with Corona typically just comes down to, you know, animating a camera or your objects and rendering out a sequence of still images with, you know, the same, pretty much the same settings as you would, you know, for still images. So it's really designed to be straightforward to use, and as you can see, you can create some really, really cool animations with Corona as well. Right, and that's it for Corona. Let's move on to doing a brief introduction
это
to
более
Vantage.
интересная тема сейчас.
This might actually be a product that not everyone is familiar with, but so yeah, that's why we're going to talk about it now. So Vantage is all about real-time ray tracing. Okay, so what that means is that you're going to be able to work in your scene in real time. So you can kind of think of it like doing your renders in a video game engine. So everything's going to be in real time, but the quality is also going to be there. Not quite as realistic as in Corona. Corona is an offline renderer after all, but it does support ray tracing, Vantage, that is. So, you know, it's a really powerful tool that you can now use with Corona, as long as you have Corona 12 installed. So what makes this workflow sort of interesting to Corona users? Well, you can do faster scene exploration because we're talking real-time rendering. That gives you immediate feedback.
Ну, то есть, если мы говорим с вами про качество картинки, то это все равно не такая фотореалистичная картинка, как в короне непосредственно, да? Я правильно понимаю?
Easy and straightforward in Vantage because, again, it's real time. You move your camera, you navigate in your scene, and you get instant results, right? Now, if you so want to, or if your projects do not need extremely detailed images or realism, you can render stuff out in Vantage. You're going to do that probably in seconds, right? At some cost to realism because, you know, there is that real-time component to it. But as you can see, you can create some really awesome images with it. And we're not just talking about still images. You can also create stunning animations. So that's also an option in Vantage.
Супер
And then,
пластиковый гранат.
you can also use it for lightning quick previs. So if you want to quickly output test images or test animations, you can most certainly do that with Vantage. You export your scene from Corona, put it into Vantage, and off you go. You're creating, you know, test angles, test animations, etc., etc. Now, let's just take a look at Vantage in action. We have Vantage open here. And so what we're just going to showcase first here is that it works in real time, right? So you can navigate in your scene. And as you can see, feedback is fast, it's fluid. And this really just allows you to explore your scene. You can try and set up different sort of vantage points, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, what we're going to do here is we're just going to create a new camera just to showcase how easy that is. How easy that you can do that. You can change the focal lengths on your camera. So that sort of workflow is there. And that's how easy it is to create multiple angles. And on top of that, what you can also do is Vantage. You see we have a bit of a light here underneath the TV, right? What you can do is you can select it and you can move your lights around if you want to reposition them. And even more, what you can also do is you can tweak your lights. So you can change their radiance or their strength. If we put in other terms, you can adjust their directionality, you can adjust their color, et cetera, et cetera. So you have all those basic light controls in there. You can also control your environment. So in this case, we're just lowering the intensity of the sun, and you could do the same with the sky, et cetera, right? Right. Now, you're not just limited to moving lights around. You can also move, you know, furniture around and props, et cetera, et cetera. So you can rotate them. So if you want to create or explore different positions sort of in real time in a rendered scene, you can do that. You can also scale objects up or down, right? Just so you can see how that's going to look like. So this really allows for a pretty creative and fluid workflow. Now, you also have color corrections that you can do in Vantage. So in this case, we're just going to enable filmic tone mapping. So you have that available. You can put in a custom LUT. You have your bloom settings. You can play with the color balance, white balance. You can do all those things inside Vantage. Now, another thing that you can do in Vantage is you can play with the materials. Now, you can't create new materials in Vantage. We want to be clear about that. But you can take existing scene materials and apply them to objects, much like what we did here. And you can also bring in new materials that are, you can also bring in new Cosmos materials. The workflow is the same as with any Cosmos integration. You just import your Cosmos material, and then you can put it anywhere you want to in your scene, right? So in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to take this wood material that we've imported from Cosmos to be our countertop, right? Now, again, you can't edit these materials, but you can reassign them, and you can bring new one in from Cosmos. And what you can also do is you can bring in new objects from Cosmos directly, along with all their materials, et cetera, et cetera. So here we've imported this armchair, right? And you can just position it to anywhere you want to in the scene, right? And so in a nutshell, this is what Vantage is, right? And hopefully you can see working in real time like this is really kind of like a pretty cool experience, because you get fast feedback, and you can really be extra creative, right? Right, okay. So with all that explained, let's talk about what is actually there in Corona 12 now in terms of the workflow. So how does Corona connect to Vantage? Whether you're working in 3ds Max or C4D, right? So Max is on the left, C4D is on the right, just in case anyone's confused. Basically, what you have to do is you need to locate the export button and just export a Corona VR scene file, right? Now, that's as easy as just locating the button, clicking on it, and saving a scene. That's really all that there is to it. You have different buttons available to you. So if you take a look at the Max screenshot, you can see that you've got the export scene button, export plus render, et cetera, et cetera. These all export your scene just in different ways. Some of these buttons will open up Vantage as soon as you export your Corona scene, and it's just gonna automatically open up Vantage, et cetera, et cetera. But they do the same thing for the most part. And the same holds true in the C4D, which you can see on the right side. We're pointing at a different button than we did with the previous slide, right? Now, the export process kind of looks like this. So you just get a dialog box, and the scene starts exporting, and you just kind of wait for it to export. It's not a super long process, but it kind of does depend, obviously, on the complexity of your scene. But as soon as the thing exports, you're basically done, right? So what we're gonna present here is now also the ability of Vantage, the fact that the Vantage gives you the ability to animate things. And so what we're going to do first here is we're going to show you very quickly, like the most basic thing, how you can animate a transition from one camera to another. So you just take your camera, you put it on the camera track list. You can add the transition duration. Okay, so we're going to change the duration to be 10 seconds. You hit play, and now you're transitioning between the two camera angles that you've
Короче, они
created,
сделали то же самое,
right? And
что
so
применяется
that's
примерно в этом.
kind of how you set that up. It's kind of straightforward in this case, right? Now, but you're not only limited to animating cameras, you can also move objects around.
Блин, как программа называется?
So we're not going to go into too much detail here. We're not going to explain what's happening on the screen, but if you follow along here, if you take a look at the video that's being played right now, you're going to be able to see that we're just setting up a bit of an animation for that little statue to move. Okay, and then we're also tying it to the camera moves, which is how the animations work. We're not going to get too much into the details right here, but now, as you can see, we've set up an animation for that statue to move. Now, one thing you probably should know about Vantage is it's not an animation suite. So it does support creating animations such as the ones you see here, but it's not necessarily designed for complex animation work. But you can still animate things directly in Vantage, just as we showcased here, right? So just something to give you an idea of what Vantage is capable of. No, this release, so Corona 12, is all about laying the foundation. So this is our first version of the Corona to Vantage workflow, if you will, and we have future improvements that are, already in the works. We want to introduce the ability to do live link. We also want to support exporting animations from your DCCs. We are trying to work on that, and obviously cannot promise all that much, but just we want to communicate that the fundamentals are there, and we're trying to push it forward, and we're going to do that with future releases. All right. So with all that, I think, Tom, it's your turn to talk about what else is new in Corona 12.
Thank you. This is going to be super brief because I know we all want to get on to saying more from Negative. So can you do the first slide of that segment, if you please, Mr. Nates?
Yes, sir.
You can be my presenter.
There we go.
Alrighty, so along with Vantage, which is the export to Vantage, which is the big thing, we have a new VFB2. It's rewritten in Qt, which makes it snappier and smoother. It's got an improved look. It's got new functionality in the form of you can A/B compare images of different sizes. This didn't used to work. You just used to get an error message. You can edit an image, drag and drop it in and edit it, whether or not the scene that image came from is there or not. Previously, you always had to do at least one pass to activate editing. So this kind of means you don't have to rely on the Corona image editor so much. Does better history management and some other things. Oh, yes, not to forget gamma, lift, and gain. That's in there too as a new tone mapping option. Next slide. The scatter instance brush, this lets you refine an existing procedural scatter. It's not there to paint scatters from scratch, but once you have your procedural scatter, you can then erase or add extra instances using a brush, which can either follow scattering rules like slope and altitude or not follow those rules. It's up to you. Next one. Curved decals, they don't need to be flat anymore. You can easily add labels to bottles by curving around the cylindrical shape. But you can also curve in a second dimension, which allows you to map tori and spheres, as we can see in this little sample image. So decals are now more flexible than ever. Sun and sky, the sun can get even lower below the horizon now, which makes your dawn, or nighttime to dawn, twilight to night transitions all the better. And my favorite from the sky is the density control for the clouds, so they can go from really thin and wispy, virtually invisible, all the way up to thick and heavy and thunderous. And next one, if
Ну, что-то картинки, которые вот они показывают, особенно экстерьерные, что-то они какие-то прям херовые, честно. Ну, дерьмо какое-то по фото, ну, по качеству вообще в целом.
to set the size of the crop box for the pattern means it's much easier to isolate the geometry that you want to repeat across the surface, and have some adjustments to UV mapping so that each map can independently pick whether it follows the base object or the pattern object. So a few quick points before we move on. Yes, Vantage, of course, is a separate license. It's a separate product. Just the same as with Vive users, you would need Vantage as a separate license. I will note, though, of course, everybody has 30 days free trial. Give it a go. Try it out for yourself. You'll be inspired to after seeing what Narrative have done. And yes, as Nate's mentioned, this is the first implementation for 13 later this year. We plan to have Live Link, which will primarily be for the purpose of allowing you to render animations from your DCC. Right now, you export to Vantage, and then you have to build the animation in Vantage, which sounds limiting, but as Narrative are going to show us, it really is not as limiting as you may think. There's still a lot you can do. And but for 13, you should be able to build the animations in C4D Max and then render those through Vantage. What else the Live Link is able to do once we get there, we will have to see. So with that, gentlemen, Are you ready over there with your super sci-fi? I'm jealous of those masks you have, though.
I'm just gonna put my my sunglasses on for a bit.
Yeah, I want those. Those are good.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, I mean, for us, this was a super fun project to work on because we've kept our eye on Vantage for a couple of years. The first time we saw it was at ACM SIGGRAPH here in London, and when it was just kind of shown behind closed doors, the official, let's say, latest build that it wasn't Lavina, it was ahead of that. It was a bit of a secret mission to come in and show some nice things.
Pretty well advanced for that.
Yeah, it was Vantage at that point, but we didn't know exactly what it could do. And then we heard the news it was V-Ray, and it was cool. And we like V-Ray. We used V-Ray for 10 years. We could use V-Ray again if we wanted to, but when the opportunity arose to use Corona with this, I mean, needless to say, we immediately jumped on that because we absolutely love Corona, and as you know, as the presentation rightfully said, and the biggest point, at least for me, is it allows an artist to be an artist, and it kind of stays the hell away with anything else apart from allowing you to be a creative. So let me load up the presentation here for a sec, and then we can kind of go through some of the things we created for it. In, I guess, the best sort of narrative fashion, we tend to go a little bit overboard with things, and even though the original commission was to create one sort of example of what you could do with Vantage, and the stage at least that we got involved with in the project was pretty much a developer build and kind of a very early exporter to kind of take it into Vantage. We quickly saw potential there, clearly, and I mean, for me at least, it took about 3 seconds to look at the interface, play around with it, and then see what was potentially possible with the constraints. Because at the moment, as I said, there's no real animation controls, or at least coming from Max into Vantage. You can move things around, scene states and stuff like that, move your light, coordinate it, and move cameras around. But you know, the question sort of arose in us: how could we create exciting and beautiful looking films given the constraints? So I guess we can answer that a little bit later, but I can show you 2 more of the films, and maybe we can talk over the first one that we showed before. So here's another one, different category. So here you go.
Вот это прикольно. Интересно посмотреть на то, как это все работает с форестпаком.
That was him. That was his little film. And once we show all of them, we can kind of talk about the other stuff. But the first one that we showed was more in the architectural realm. This is more automotive or product. And then the last one was what would happen if you use it for VFX. So this is our answer to that.
А что такие страшные? Так слушай, погоди.
I guess the answer we found to that particular question was throw a lot of stuff at the screen and sort of showcase it as a frozen moment in time, let's say, and get the biggest environment we can, and then just move cameras in there and then just be creative. Let me just quickly go out of here for a second before we go into this one.
Но это мы видели в начале.
So this is Maria's one. Let me just take the volume down on this one so we can talk over it. Oh, the volume is already down. Oh, pre-preparation. Amazing. So this one, we wanted to kind of have our little own spin of what an architectural project would look like, because everyone's already sort of done more residential or example of big master plans and things. So, we kind of, well, Maria treated this one as an art piece, right? It's something beautiful to look at. So we actually managed to get some photogrammetry environments. It was a chapel, and then she just did this very beautiful, very soft art installation with all the fabrics and everything. And then because it's ray tracing, get some chrome balls in there. Some of them are completely smooth, homage to a bit of the VFX route, I guess. And then some of them are disco balls because, the caustics and all the nice reflections and things you can get from it. For this one, we use a lot of sort of art direction, let's say, driving what the end result was. That's what we call this one, the Maria multiverse, because it kind of exists into reality. It's the very much matter-of-fact version of it, where it's kind of beautifully dappled during normal daytime, and then we go into like the slightly disco pink causticy refraction version of it, diffraction if you were. And I think, let's see,
some nice little breakdowns.
Yeah, so I guess you can do all the jibber jabber on this part.
Yeah, and you if you want to. This one's okay, so I'm not doing the line first. Okay. So yeah, I mean, without a doubt, Vantage has some insane tools which are going to speed up everything. One of them is the previs, and this is real time. I have not sped this video up, so you're able to get an extremely kind of low res and kind of noisy kind of output, but that is going to give you way more information than a kind of viewport render from, not even a render.
Ну
like
какая разница, это все равно очень быстро.
I'm just going to let this whole thing play whilst I'm talking, but it goes through just some of the main things which we found super helpful when we were doing this, and the things which are so much faster than doing this the traditional method. With Max and Corona, so obviously material changes you can see there, they're just happening lightning fast. All the reflections are updating everything. Depth of field, amazing. You can change all the settings, you get instant feedback, which is just insane. I've always dreamed of being just able to move around the scene and just be able to have depth of field always on, so you can just quickly, because obviously in Vantage as well, you can click an object and it will auto focus to it as well, which is just amazing. Go to the next one, the lighting. Okay, and then lighting, I mean, without a doubt, Vantage is the fastest way to light your scene. It's so fast.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back now to kind of holding the sun and moving it around whilst I wait for it to update, because this is just insane. Just the speed. I mean,
well, the some of the shots that you made, basically, if we were doing it in the traditional sort of clicky way with the sun system or whatever,
we would have given up. Yeah. I mean, there are some shots where just a slither of light came through at a particular degree, and I probably would have never got to that had I been doing it the traditional method. I may have just given up eventually. But it's so fast and it's so much fun. I've always dreamed of this type of system where you can just move around freely, really quickly, like you're saying. Again, this is all pretty much just kind of real time. I may have sped it up a tiny bit because I was slow moving the mouse, but other than that, it's all pretty much as it is. And there's one with this is swapping in different HDRIs. You can see that's like super quick to do. I think the thing I probably like the most is the sun system, because it has two sliders, one for the height and one for the kind of rotation. So you can really, really quickly find a lighting solution.
I mean, it has the traditional systems with the geographical location and everything,
does,
but
yeah.
it also has this easier way of literally just playing around. It's like rotation that way
Yeah,
and then height.
And now I want that in Max and Corona as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most amazing things about our experience, at least, you know, making this, was the fact that it very much followed the ethos that we love about the Corona sort of mindset, which is essentially get out of the way of the artist and just let the artist be an artist, right? There is a learning curve that's about maybe that big. And then everything else that you know, the interface, everything, how it moves, and you know, there's a lot of logic to it. There are a few specific little things that are, you know, specifically Vantage, but compared to jumping in something like Blender or going to any other thing, it's, you know, I mean, you need to learn a brand new architecture.
Yeah, I mean,
and it stops being fun.
Yeah, it pretty much takes. I mean, if you know how to use Max and Corona, this pretty much takes half a day to a day to learn, really.
Yeah,
and it's very quick.
And
very quick.
For me, this is the new interactive render. You know what I mean? Like, I think one of the big things that we wanted to achieve with these films is just showcase the power of Vantage's rendering capabilities as a standalone product. Let's say, obviously, you have the workflow of working in conjunction with Max and kind of having the backwards and forwards, but we also wanted to kind of give justice and sort of honor the fact that this is a real-time ray tracing engine. Like, for decades we were dreaming about this, and it's here now, right? So it's like, what can we make with this crazy system? And you just need to have, you know, a pretty good graphics card, and then you're able to fly. Obviously, if you have a 4090, then you know you probably have your life sorted. But we used 3090s, and this was crazy to
So fast.
Yeah, it was insane.
Fast. I mean, like, we could have said, okay, we've done all our we know all our cameras and we know our correct lights, and we could have gone back and rendered it in Corona, but we wanted to kind of push this to the limit to see what it's capable of.
Yeah.
And seeing what it's capable of, I think, you know, the future holds is a lot of great things are coming, because Vantage will continue to improve.
I mean, as soon as it gets parity with what's happened with where it is with V-Ray in terms of feature one-to-one, let's say, then, you know what I mean, it's like, what's your excuse at that point in time to you know, what's the thing to complain about? Just be creative, just like and just create now. I don't know, and I think the other sort of big one was, for example, we were working on the Gods film that we've been working on for a bit. That's a Corona production, which now probably will have some Vantage element into it, because it just the exchange of assets from our super high-end assets that we've made in Corona was so easy and so quick, surprisingly so. In about 2 hours, maybe, let's say, I managed to go into the other software, pose a god, and then, you know, bring it into Max, do all the materials, do all the treatment and everything, and then just export it into Vantage, and, you know, throw in some HDRIs and stuff, and just, you know, play around with it and see what could happen. And from there, we just had to buy new graphics cards to be able to to render all the environment and everything afterwards.
I mean, it can still handle quite a bit on a lower graphics card, but obviously it's actually, we've been testing it recently with some much bigger scenes, and it's surprisingly,
no, it's crazy.
It's amazing. It was barely even using like, it was using about 10 gigs of VRAM in a very populated scene. I think we found it was more the textures, which would
yeah. I mean,
because
you need to be,
because my one, it just had the car in a lot of containers, and that was using, I don't know, it was using maybe 20 gigs, but that's because it had some very high textures. Whereas I had another scene from our Olympia project, which had tons of forest packs, it had loads of stuff, and I didn't think I thought this isn't going to work very well, and it worked very well. So
yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things, I guess, is, well, at least in our specific scenarios, because we've been in the industry for a while, I've been in it for 20 years, and I started in a very, very, very different time to what it is now. So for me, the fact that I had to like problem solve a few things, and then remember that certain things actually fit into VRAM of the graphics card, and then it's like one of the first things was the textures, and then optimizing those. Then you went absolutely balls deep into Substance Designer as well, and managed to get a car shader that matched the Corona one that you had as well.
A pretty good excuse to spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
But we didn't have to tinker with that many things. It wasn't, it wasn't the same as, when you use Unreal, and there's a very steep learning curve.
Oh my God,
and
it's not even.
there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a different product really, but it does have some similarities. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, my patience does not extend to that realm. Anyway, I think that's enough jibber jabber from us. You can open the floor.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, gentlemen, and of course Maria, who's not there, but I do love the multiverse animation. So yeah, I think it's just fantastic. I mean, as you say, this was an early version. I think you started work on this probably with about the first or the second version of the export we had. And things have actually improved since. More materials come across properly and all the rest of it. So yeah, let's blast through some questions. So let's see, where will we start? Wayne was asking, since the exports of your scene, what materials and workflows should we use for maximum compatibility? Are third-party things like FlowGen, Multimap, etc. supported? Third-party things are not supported because, FlowGen would have to write something that was compatible with Vantage as well as with Max, and they're not going to. So you'll find, and this of course is the same if you are exporting to Unreal. If any plugins you use, third-party non-chaos stuff does not carry across to Vantage. In terms of what goes across from Corona, we have a documents page that lists what comes across from Corona. But there's also the V-Ray page, because if it doesn't work from V-Ray, it's not going to work from Corona either, because it basically means Vantage doesn't have support for that. For example, like a slicer. Vantage doesn't have a slicer. So you can't export a slicer from Corona or V-Ray into Vantage. So if you stick with very simple materials, and I don't mean simple as in terms of you can have quite a complex tree of materials added together, but if you're avoiding stuff like the distance map and all of that, it should work just fine.
Tom, we found a very good method was to, if you do have a lot of complex stuff, like you have using, say, composites and mixed maps, some of them work, some of them don't. I know composite currently doesn't work, but a lot of the time what we were doing is just rendering those maps out and replacing them. That is slightly time consuming, but you can script that kind of stuff as well. And obviously in the future, all of that stuff will be updated as well. But for the time being, that's a kind of, it's not too long of a process to do as well. And it works. I was able to get more or less one-to-one results with Max and Corona and Vantage. There was really not that much difference in them. Like I was happy with both results. So you can make everything work essentially.
Excellent. Can you acquire Vantage with that V-Ray? Yeah, Vantage is a separate product. It is separate from V-Ray. It is separate from Corona. So licensing that is a totally separate license. Will it be available for the Cinema 4D? No, because there is no Mac version of Vantage. And that would be on the Vantage team as to whether or not there ever will be a version. And somebody was asking about the GPU you used. Did you say that was 3090s?
Yeah, we were using 3090s, which were amazing. They were really good, actually. We had no kind of holdups or anything. There was, and there's also like, did you get any crashes? I don't think so.
I mean,
no, it was pretty good. Like, and it never really ran out of RAM. It was, yeah.
Well, I did in some of the God stuff, but it's just because it was just the insane amount of stuff rendered at 4K. if you go you can crash anything. You can crash Max, you can crash Corona, you can crash anything. So it's not really. It's more.
I think I only had like one the whole time I used it, which is and actually we were throwing 16K textures at it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was
Well, and also a lot of the stuff that, at least what I did, at least with the God stuff, is set dressing, right? So it was very, very quick to just iterate, just create variations of the scene and stuff. And just like if it wasn't rendering, then I just removed some of the 16K monsters from the background that would never be seen at all, and then I added a few leaves, put a few trees, moved everything in real time.
Because obviously, I mean, I don't know the kind of intricacies of GPU rendering, but because we're so used to CPU rendering, we expect things not to work.
Yeah.
The GPU is a very different ballgame, and you do get like very quick feedback on very complex scenes.
Yeah.
So you're kind of you're very wowed by it at first.
Yeah. Then you're like, I want to do more.
Yeah, you're desensitized.
Do more. Mina's asking if this ability to bake like Vantage isn't unreal. I mean, my question is, why do you need to? It's real time and it's ray traced and it's got GI. I really don't see that there's any benefit to baking lighting, which basically, freezes things up and limits what your scene can do and what you can do in real time. She was also asking about DLSS. That really comes into play while you're moving around. And basically, the default in Vantage has an intelligent. It chooses between two different versions because there's one that's smoother while you're moving, and one that does better, especially with reflections and things when you're standing still. So the default setting is if you start moving, it will swap to one version of the DLSS, basically to speed up the real-time navigating to the scene. And the minute you stop, it flips over to the other one, which gives you the better quality. And obviously that is different when you do a final render, because it is the same as Corona, V-Ray. There was a final render button where you get the maximum quality, but it might still take a few minutes per frame. It's no longer real time. Depends how complex your scene is to render out. Which I think ties into an earlier question about, is it less time and effort to render? I mean, rendering is faster, yes, but I mean, there is a sacrifice in terms of quality and the ultimate in realism.
Can I sort of jump in and so there, it's like one of the things that I noticed at least was I did a very specific scene which had an ungodly amount of like particles and things and depth of field and everything in Corona, and it was rendered at 1080p originally a few months ago, and it was taking 3 hours per frame. And I did a similarly complex visually, obviously maybe computationally it wasn't the same, but visually and art direction wise it was very, very similar, and it was taking me, for 5 seconds of animation, it was taking me like at most 2 hours at 4K. So if you do offline, it's still an absolute fraction of the time.
Stupid.
Oh yes,
it's crazy. And then obviously throw into After Effects, do the same comping and all that sort of stuff, and it's, in my opinion at least, for the purposes and the art direction and the exercise that we're doing, it's indistinguishable. Maybe under the hood, not the same, but for us, end result, it looked of a similar quality.
Excellent. Yeah, so I mean, there's definite time savers. I know people, I think my concern is people have a belief that, you can render a 5-second animation in about 20 seconds using real time, but it will still take some time to render. But that will still be a fraction of what it would take you in Corona or V-Ray. What scatterer did you use for the trees of the Old Gods movie?
What scatterer? Force Pack.
Mm-hmm.
Force Pack, and I think, because Jose did that. He's our resident environment lover, tree hugger. Yeah, I think some of the stuff that he did also might have been Chaos Scatter as well on some of the parts. Well, I did, for example, this is not answering the question of the scatter, but essentially, if there's scenes in the movie where you can see there's hair, because the environment is supposed to be frozen in time, there's hair and wind and all that sort of stuff. All the little raindrops that are on the characters and also on the hair and everything, that's all Chaos Scatter. Because
basically you could use either one.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't find a way to do it with Force Pack, so I just found a way to do it with Chaos Scatter, and it was just easier and quicker.
Cool. Is Vantage just for rendering? Is there a way to use it for VR experiences? Well, it has just in the recent update does have VR functionality added, but you still have to have Vantage running. So, I mean, if you had a client, I guess you could take your laptop with Vantage to them and they could experience the VR experience. Otherwise, they'd need, as I understand it, I haven't looked into this in detail, they'd need their own Vantage license to run it locally. So there's no real way to like export the VR experience. You might be able to export it as a movie, don't know. It's brand new, only came out in 2.5, which came out exactly the same day as Corona 12. And I have my Quest 3 set over there, but I haven't tried out that aspect of Vantage just yet. What was the resolution of your video? It's all 4K, all three of them, aren't they?
Yeah, 4K. Yeah, absolutely. Native.
Lovely. Let's see. There are restrictions regarding scatter settings. You can obviously kill your GPU memory if you scatter too much, but it is quite surprising how much you can actually scatter. I think you guys would agree. You've kind of said as much so far that yeah, you didn't run into any limits. And look at your old god scene. Wow.
And so far nothing. You know, whatever Max could handle in the test scene, he threw it at Vantage and it was fine. Like,
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have a problem with geometry much. Yeah.
Excellent. And I will also point out just there was a question, but can you get stuff from Vantage back into Corona or Max? The answer is no. At the moment, anything you set up in Vantage just remains in Vantage. As to whether that'll change with the live link, we'll need to see when we get to 13. The exact extent to how far we can push the live link for 13 remains to be seen once we start developing it.
Apparently, does it work with V-Ray to go back into V-Ray?
I believe so. I believe you can actually move an object in Vantage and then it moves in Max.
For lighting and stuff, does it?
Mm-hmm. So you can kind of use it. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check because we're about to sit down and plan out 13 in detail, in which I'll be doing an exploration of exactly what the live link does and doesn't do in V-Ray, so we can set our targets for 13. I know for one thing, you can certainly update your scene in Max and then it updates in Vantage automatically. So you can kind of use it like an interactive renderer. That would be nice. We're not promising that because we have a bit of an extra conversion step to get to Vantage. So I don't know how fluid that would be. It will, I mean, our primary aim for Live Link is to let you render animations that you've built in Max and C4D through Vantage. But if we can go further than that, we will.
yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody asked rather than hitting render and Corona, now export the scene to Vantage and hit render. Same quality as Corona in lesser time. I wouldn't say the same quality. You will possibly lose some, certainly for some clients. And bear in mind, if this is an animation, the answer is no. You can't get the animation out of Max or C4D into Vantage. You have to build it yourself in Vantage, at least until the live link comes along in 13, which is due kind of October, end of the year. Vantage only supports up to 2 GPUs, correct?
But we
Camera path edit for animation and future Vantage. You'd have to put that request in to the Vantage team. Do check the Vantage documentation. The 2 GPU thing, you had a comment.
Oh no, I it's funny because maybe it was just it wasn't showing properly, but I had it where it had 4 slots for 4 GPUs. I don't have 4 GPUs, but it was ability for 4, and I was like, oh okay, that's new. But maybe that was it was just displaying wrong. I don't know. Yeah.
It could be, yeah. But it will only, no matter how many GPUs you have, it'll only use 2 at the most for rendering. And they don't pool memory. I mean, that's the way multiple GPUs work in any product. Yep. The memory of each one is. So if your scene is 20 gig, both cards need 24 gig on them so they can both render it.
We'll just power, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, Corona distance map, no. Again, Vantage doesn't have a distance map, so you can't export the Corona distance map to Vantage because it has no distance map. So that was Peto, sorry. Let's see. Different render elements. Yes, it has different render elements. Do check the Vantage tutorials and documentation. There's a lot about Vantage that's covered on Chaos TV under Vantage. We leave you gals to dive into that. But yeah, Z-depth, all that kind of thing is in there. Most people are asking in the chat, they're supposed to use the Q&A. What is this? So it is hard to spot some. Oh, that's a good question. What samples did you use for your final renders? You know, was it 1,000, 10,000?
We found that and I don't know if this is the correct way to do it, but after some experimentation, we actually found that really rendering at higher resolution, so we rendered at 4K, and anywhere between 100 to about 300 samples did the best job. I did tons of testing, and sometimes, a lot of the time, I found that on my scene in particular, beyond 300 to 400 samples wasn't really changing that much. But I found always the kind of best output at around 4K resolution and 200 to 300 samples. That might sound confusing, but and I don't know exactly what it's doing under the bonnet, but yeah, I just found that to be the kind of best solution in the end, because obviously if you go lower resolution, I found that you have to push the samples higher in order to retain more detail, if that sounds correct. And well, we just found the kind of, I don't know what you did on your one, but I found that was my optimal solution, and that was the quickest way, or a pretty fast way to do it, because sometimes you really don't need to push them that high at all, particularly if you're really close to an object. It's sometimes literally 100 is absolutely fine, which is the default. And if you're doing like a really quick, dirty kind of previs, you can put them on 5 or 10, and you can get a pre-visualization out in literally 10 seconds. Literally 10 seconds, straight to MP4 as well.
My experience was a little bit. Well, it was. Basically, I had one solution for the gods and one solution for the Maria multiverse. So for the gods, it samples at 100 and using the NVIDIA denoise, and
didn't use the other one.
And that was fine for that one. Some of the detail that I felt was lost, I could actually bring back from some of the elements when I was doing the compositing, because there isn't currently, at least, denoising on the elements. So on the very, very specific things that I wanted to enhance from there, I could bring back from the specular, I could bring back from a couple of the different sort of atmospherics and that sort of stuff, because I was going for a gritty look, let's say. And then on the Maria multiverse, it was not using the NVIDIA denoiser. Funny enough, it was using the Intel one, and then it was 200 samples.
Which is again,
and it retained everything that I wanted to from the look of it, and it rendered basically. So I didn't experiment. There was a lot of experimentation going on all the computers to see what 400 did or whatever. So the conclusions that he came to were the specific examples of his scene, and they kind of vary. Like
when I have tested on other stuff, that does seem to be a pretty good kind of ballpark, anywhere between 100 to about 300. And
for example, like the Maria one as well, because it's all in direct illumination. There's a little bit of lighting coming through, and it's HDRI based. It was kind of different. Your one was directly in the sun, using the sun system, and some HDRI here and there.
And also, if you're doing a still, sometimes you might just want to leave the denoiser off. And also samples. It's nice to have a bit of noise, but obviously if it's an animation, sometimes you can get a lot of flickering and stuff, and therefore you'd use the denoiser. And then if you wanted to add grain back in, fine.
That's one of the things I wanted to actually, like, you reminded me. It's like I, in no moment whatsoever, funny enough, found any distracting flickering or fireflies on anything, ever.
No.
That's good news.
That was my experience, at least, with that. I don't know your metals.
I didn't have much. I only had a tiny bit on like the shiny things, but it wasn't too much. But the denoiser fixed all of that, because there's the nice checkbox which says remove fireflies or flickering or something. I forgot what it's called now, but yeah, it does a pretty good job.
Cool. do you need to reset up the lighting? No, for Corona, the lights will come across. So your Vantage scene will start with equivalent lighting. I mean, it's not going to look identical. Nothing is when you move between one render engine and another. But the general layout of your lights will all be the same, and then you can tweak to taste, but you don't need to rebuild the lighting from scratch.
I don't know if this has been tweaked now, but I noticed one thing. I believe that I feel like the HDRI was coming in switched.
I think that's entirely possible.
Seeing some from the Cosmos browser inside of Max, and then when I went into Vantage, what I noticed was I just had to flip the HDRI, and then maybe a bit, but it's very, very quick.
Is it Corona export to Vantage exposed to Metscript? Don't know. Ask over on the forums. That'll be on for our tech support team. Do we plan to add angle control for Corona camera clipping plane? There is no plans. Put in a feature request. Send us a ticket so that it gets into the system. What denoise value did you use for your final animations, if you remember?
Yeah, so on my one, I didn't change anything in any of the settings whatsoever. The only thing I ever changed was literally upon export, and I would just change samples if I felt like I needed to. Everything else I left stock. I wanted to see what it was capable of, that kind of stock. And actually, as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure once when I was experimenting, when I tried to change the noise, it just switched back to so I probably don't know how to use it properly. But I found whatever the stock is, I think it's like 0.10 threshold, isn't it? Which is that's what the default is for interactive mode. I don't know, did you change anything?
Well, that's how much I know. I use everything stock, and in my understanding of the noise, it's either on or off. I mean, I assume the noise threshold is being asked there is when you're not using denoiser or AI denoiser, and then you kind of render based on samples.
Because the setting you have inside is, I think, for interactive purposes at that moment. So correct me if I'm wrong. So it's for how long it kind of continues to.
Yeah, exactly. Until it resolves.
Yeah,
basically like Corona.
Which I don't know if there's a way to change that kind of final render. So it can, that's just a sample.
Yeah, I think it's before it's
clearly
not on the viewport.
I don't think we were I don't think we're equipped to actually answer this question properly. We're just rambling at this point.
Well, but the great thing is it just proves you don't need to know. Just press the button, then it works. That is very much like a Corona philosophy, isn't it?
Basically, we're people that are happy with the 8 to 10% noise in Corona. So, an element of noise is happy. So we didn't notice anything like very.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
it just added to the mystique of the piece.
Another question about the Mac. No, it will not. It won't be available on the Mac. Sorry, because that would require Vantage being ported to the Mac, which is not something we in the Corona team control. You can always contact the Vantage team, but I suspect, given the sheer difference between Metal and the Windows GPUs, it may not be possible in a hurry. We've actually gone a little over time. And let me just see if there's any other questions. Not the same quality. It looks good for time you save. I agree. Distance map. No, we discussed that doesn't work. Somebody, Menudin, you say you're facing a material issue exporting to Vantage. Do contact us via ticket. We'll be more than happy to help you out if you describe your problem. In terms of recording, this should become available, I believe, generally on YouTube, maybe in a couple of weeks or a month. There'll be a way to access it earlier. I suspect you'll be sent a copy of the recording if you're an attendee. We shall see. Yeah, camera path edit for future Vantage version. That's a feature request for the Vantage team. You can send that in. For various reasons, I suspect it won't happen, and the reasons why will become known later in the year.
That one's already
okay.
English for the last pass, that last question.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't edit it like a spline, I think is what they mean. Which is true. You can't set animations along like a keyframe path. This is the one bit that took me a bit of a mental shift when moving to Vantage. I'm so used to keyframing individual objects rather than saving scene states, and then having a path that you can tweak. And you don't get that in Vantage, but once you readjust your thinking, there's still a heck of a lot you can do.
Once the live links there, then there'll kind of be no need.
Yes, that's right.
And at this stage, I was quite surprised at how robust the camera moves you can do is if you kind of know what you're doing with. But just thinking of going from point A to point B, right? You have a lot of control there that you might not even thinking about. Even to the point of how quick you move the mouse every now and again affects the curve of interpolation between 2 points and everything.
But it's really good that you can update it afterwards, the length. So you say, okay, this is my starting point, this is my end point. Yeah. And then it will just make a transition for you. And then you can go in there and then you can say, actually, I want this to be 10 seconds. Then you can change your mind and say, actually, I want this to be 5 seconds.
Same as Tom, is like it was kind of the mental.
At first you're a little bit confused, but then once you get used to it, like particularly for ArcViz kind of stuff, which is all these kind of very slow and simple movements, it's just amazing for that kind of stuff.
Precisely. Yeah, this is why I don't want people to wait for. I mean, LiveLink will bring benefits in terms of animation, but I don't think people should wait because you can already do a lot. So dive on. I believe you can also just move your mouse and walk through the scene and record it and then play it back. I haven't tested that myself, but that would let you build a little bit more complex of a path to a scene.
It's really good to do that because you get a real kind of sense of the space as well. So you can walk around it as if you're in a game, using the traditional controls of the keyboard, and then you can even record it and then do a kind of offline render of that. Maybe you want to send it to a client or something and give them a real kind of idea of what that space would feel like to walk around.
I find that myself. Even though you can't send, if you find a good camera angle, you can't automatically send it back to Max or C4D. But I did find just being able to walk around the scene, it really changed my feeling, my sense of the scene, if you see what I mean. It made a world of difference.
It has an automatic collision system, so just like that, all of the objects have a collision, so you can't walk through them.
Yeah, so can't go like.
Yeah, there's a lot happening under the bonnet, which you kind of don't realize. It's just doing it all for you.
Exporting the frame buffer settings, some of the tone mapping, but Vantage's tone mapping is different from Corona's, and translating it from A to B could be hard, but we'll see what we can do.
Are you guys? I have a question actually. Are you gonna, me too. Are you gonna make? You know how in Corona you have the ASUS checkbox? Are you gonna have that in Vantage as well?
Oh, I'm going to say probably not, because our ASUS checkbox is in the tone mapping. It's a bit of a weird thing. Really? It's because a lot of people took it to be full OCIO compatibility, which is not.
I just like the way it looks. I don't even understand.
Me too. Me too. You know what? We can ask if the Vantage team can implement it. I don't know. There's no harm in asking, right?
Well, it's just an LUT, isn't it? Is it not?
Pretty much. It's not, but it can be simulated as one.
I think we should.
I might help here a little bit. So in Vantage, you got the AMP has filmic tone mapping.
Yeah.
That's basically, from my understanding, but don't quote me necessarily, should be a very similar curve to what you get in ASUS OT, because it's all basically being taken from the OCIO ASUS sweetener curve.
Yeah, I was looking all over the internet. I was like, doesn't ASUS LUT exist? And then I realized that I really don't understand anything about ASUS whatsoever. And it led me down. It led me to a lot of different information, which I realized that was
ASUS is like religion and politics.
Yeah,
don't bring it up.
You know what? It's in all seriousness, there is a lot of misunderstanding as to what these things are and what they do and what they're intended for, really. But that misunderstanding is not, of course, individuals will make videos and training documentation with their own misunderstandings, and then it looks like it's Yeah, it's a rabbit hole. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, just start exploring color spaces and woo.
Exactly. The goal,
Depth of field per camera. I'll be honest, I don't know if the depth of field is per camera or not. Did you guys find out if depth of field is universal or is it stored per camera? I would imagine it's stored per camera.
you can customize it per camera. And
Okay, thank you.
it just requires an update of the scene state, let's say.
Yeah.
Or the camera
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
like update little thingy mode.
Yeah.
It, like remembers your last settings, but
Yeah.
it's per camera, and it has like a very good default value as well. I know where that person asked that. I think that's the same in Unreal, that you have a kind of universal setting. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Is there a multi-view port with wireframe? No, there is not. It's not intended as a modeling tool. It is more of an exploration and exploration simple animation tool. It's not intended to be like a digital content creation like Max or C4D. But the idea is you do any work that requires that kind of setup over in Max or C4D. And by the way, just to be clear, if you take it into Vantage and start changing things and setting up animations, you can go back into Max C4D, make changes, and you can send those changes across without losing what you created in Vantage. Just also to be clear, if you want to go back into Max and C4D, it doesn't mean you destroy all the hard work that you've already set up in Vantage. We dive into this in detail in our tutorials, which came out just at the end of last week. They're an hour long, one for Max, one for C4D. Do give them a watch.
That was much our workflow throughout the whole thing. So we would, like since the very first export, I would have imported like a whole new scene, 10, 20 times basically. And it does not destroy. You still have your main master Vantage file, and it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't ruin any of the lighting or anything. You literally just re-import exactly the
geometry
materials. Or you can, if you want to import just one thing, you can just do file and then import, and it will import just that one thing. So it's very updatable.
Well, yeah,
It is.
That's very much how sort of the gods worked in that sense, because like we had environment, we had detail environment, we had Poseidon, we had Zeus, we had monsters, we had mud splashes, and every single one of them, posed originally in Max, then imported, and then those went through countless iterations. So it was very nice to kind of go into the elements tab or whatever, or the lister, and then just like delete the whole subfolder and all the children, and then kind of like just re-import it again.
It comes in, if you import something, it comes in with its
as a group, but everything is nicely sort of laid out.
And on the most recent update, all of the object names remain the same, whereas before they had like a default name for Vantage. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I haven't used the latest one.
Wait. Yeah. I think.
Yes.
Yes. And thank you for staying late, guys, and everybody watching. I'm going to wrap it up with, when can we expect guitar playing from you, Tom? I'm not live. I don't do live. I have recordings. You can go and listen to some recordings on Spotify. Just ping me if you want to know where the heck they are. Excellent. Well, we're 15 minutes over, which is quite long. I see we still have 130 odd people have stayed. Thank you all for hanging around. I hope you found this useful. I'll say cheerio, and I'll pass it along to everybody else to say their goodbyes.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Indeed, thank you for tuning in, and we hope you've enjoyed the session.
And you know where to reach us if you have any questions after this. Usual place, tickets, emails, Facebook if you have to. We'll be happy to help. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
See you guys soon.
Окей, guys. Короче, резюме. Значит, вебинар session. Good. Meet your expectations. Частично. Короче, окей, ладно. В общем, ребятушки, что я узнал из этого всего спича? А, Надо попробовать корону и вантаж. Надо попробовать корону и вантаж. В общем, я скачал 12-ю корону, скачал 2,5 вантаж. Я жду, когда ее кто-нибудь поставит уже вот из, так сказать, окружения, потому что пока что она вышла только в одной версии. Вот. И я не знаю, как она там сейчас себя поведет, так сказать. Корона 12. Ну, кстати, между прочим, вот она уже лежит на нашем всеми любимом ресурсе. Так. Scanned Materials, раздача обновлена. При запуске Макса вылетают ошибки. Ну, не знаю, короче. Так, а если Vantage... Vantage, похоже, нет. Ну, в общем, я задавал вопрос по Corona Distance. Corona Distance и карты Distance в Vantage не используются, то есть придется... Вот, просто мы как бы в своем пайплайне Distance периодически используем для того, чтобы по карте Distance от каких-то объектов скатерить, соответственно, форесты и прочие все дела. Дистансов там нету, поэтому нужно все это делать какими-то стандартными методами, либо, например, использовать в качестве дистансов, я думаю, include, exclude, значит, области, и в качестве распространения просто накидывать какие-нибудь карты дирта, вот, чтобы не использовать карту Corona Distance. Соответственно, что еще? Ну, те ролики, которые они показали, они, конечно, крутые. Если это действительно просто Max to Vantage из короны, Max плюс корона to Vantage, это, конечно, охеренно. То есть вот Old Gods это прям вообще топ. Я сначала подумал, что это кадры из этого... как же мультик-то назывался? Короче, там про испанцев. Когда испанцы пришли там на какое-то болото, и там какая-то была богиня, которая там всех их убила в конце. Забыл название, короче, ладно. Вот. Ролик с тачкой тоже классный. Ну, надо попробовать, короче. Надо попробовать. В общем, посмотрите вебинар. Ну, собственно, вы его уже посмотрели, скорее всего. Может быть, я это видео вообще в начало поставлю. Да. Если у вас хорошо с английским, посмотрите вебинар, как бы я его полностью записал. Вот. В принципе, не сказать, что было супер много полезной информации, но то, что было, оно как бы, ну, пойдет. Окей. Все. До новых встреч. Всем пока-пока.